Hey guys, I'm back today with Sarah, and we are here to chat about the painting that I sent out last week in my newsletter. It's called Vintage Yellow, and it was painted in 2022, I think.
I love this painting. Yellow is my favorite color, so it's beautiful to see. I'm excited to hear everything that you're going to share about the creative process to this painting because it's kind of monochromatic, like you're in the same color zone, but we'll get to that in a second. First, like, why did you decide to paint this vase? Is there a story behind it, or was it random?
Yeah, so it was like if you read my newsletter last week, um, this was one of the little vintage vases that I found at one of the antique shops in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. And I go into these shops to find stuff to paint, like new interesting things with different colors. And when I saw this, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to have that vase. Usually when I find stuff in these places, like I don't think I want to paint something by itself. It's more like I'm buying it and it's going to be some like supportive element or be part of like several different um things that I would set up in a still life. But for this one, I don't know, I think I just got to a point where I had it for a few months. I kept looking at it and I was like, I just want to paint that base. I just want to paint the base and I want to paint it. I want to kind of like amplify the colors of it, kind of celebrate the colors, I guess, which is why I did go for more like monochromatic or like, actually, I wouldn't know if it's monochromatic. Would it be like an analogous? So it's like colors next to each
Yeah.
other. It's kind of like from orange to yellow.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because most artists, when they want to enhance a color, they try to put the contrasting color to it, like either a blue or green, like on the opposite end. But then you try to stay more on the same side of the spectrum. So what like the towel beneath it with the patterns and then the background, was that intentional?
It was. I think I had recently worked on a few other paintings where I had done something similar. It was like a blue green. Before doing those, I was more like doing what you said, where I was looking for like complementary colors or more contrasting
Mm-hmm.
colors. But I enjoyed painting those analogous color schemes with the blue green so much that I was like, I'm gonna try it in yellow.
Mm.
And I was like really itching to just paint in yellow, which I still am in that phase right now where I just like painting yellow.
Yeah.
But yeah, this one was like definitely scratching an itch, like to go on the other side of the color wheel from the blue green and be like, let me do something over here and see what happens.
When artists usually play around with complementary colors, it does make the color just like pop. But since you are on one side of the spectrum, like the yellows, the oranges, I wonder if you were processing it more as, oh, I'm working in values because they're all like similar tone, not tones, but on the similar side of the spectrum, and not so much combining the color composition since it was more.
Yeah, the darker value of the dark orange behind it. That's like a dark orange piece of paper that I had that I just stuck behind.
Okay.
Um, and I was trying to create some contrast, but I was thinking about value and color at the same time to like get something darker than the vase behind it so that the vase could kind of like pop forward. But I wouldn't have chosen a yellow, I don't think, like a dark yellow. I felt like it needed to be a little bit different
Oh,
in color.
yeah. Very good, very good. Well, okay, so what were some of the challenges in painting this piece?
Oh, well, two things that I can remember right now. The first is the getting these shapes in here accurate
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
the proportions. So maybe more of like a drawing challenge than anything else was definitely challenging for me. And once I have paint on my palette and I'm not working on an underpainting anymore, I'm using a lot more negative space. So in order to get these shapes, I'm actually painting the yellow outside the lines and then coming back, cutting back in with like the darker orange.
Okay.
And there was a lot of like, I mean, if you see between this shape and this shape and this shape on this side and then here, and then it had to kind of like match over here and look like it was all related.
Mm-hmm.
Getting that working was tricky. So there was that. And I wasn't expecting it. I guess I should have accepted it given the shape of this thing, but once I got in there, I was like, oh, actually, this is trickier than I thought it was going to be. And then the other thing was the cloth. I don't think I had created a pattern with this much complexity.
Okay.
And I didn't want to paint the like, I think that this was like a floral pattern. I didn't want to actually paint the flowers. I just wanted to create like a simplified give like an idea that there was a pattern there.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was tricky. And we should probably just can move into move into my other screen share. What it looked like it was this floral pattern. I guess what I could have done is I could have gone and drawn the pattern and I could have seen the pattern as like these individual shapes. But I don't
Mm-hmm.
like to do that with pattern because it gets way too detailed, way too much information. And what I want to do is I want to create like I want to think about the planes first and simplifying the planes and creating something that looks like cloth and feels flat and it's going back in space. And I want to do that without all of the extraneous like pattern and information. And so in this case, I had to
Mm-hmm.
decide, well, do I want to make that base? Do I want to make, if I'm going to make a base color and pretend to only see one color in the cloth, is it going to be that the white part of the cloth or the light colored part or that orange part? And in this case, I chose to do the whiter, or it's more like a grayish, like a darker, light middle value. But that's what I
Mm-hmm.
chose because I think at the time I was thinking that it would be, I could come on top with the these orange bits of detail. I think if I were to paint this today, I would have done it the opposite. Like I would have started with the orange and come in on top with the the white or the gray.
Okay. We can go into let's get into the process because I did want to I would like to know how did you decide on the placement of colors? Because I know you have your creative process of layering. In the newsletter, you express that you use like a tone of green in regards to the yellow. I would like to ask more about that process, the placement of colors.
The placement of color. Here's my underpainting. So I started with like trying to get the big shapes created, and I didn't actually fill in like the dark of the background fully
Mm-hmm.
until here. The color of the underpaint, when I first
Mm-hmm.
mixed that color, I looked over at my setup and I asked myself, like, what is the most predominant color in the whole thing? Like dark color, darkish color. I don't want
Mm-hmm.
to do a light color for an underpainting, but like a darker color.
Mm-hmm.
And I mixed that, and I think it was probably something like this. Let me see what was if I have a picture of my palette before. Yeah, so it's this color, and I was trying to get somewhere in the range of this background color
Mm-hmm.
for that underpainting color to make it easier on myself. I was like, oh, if I go ahead and just do it in this color, then I've started. So that was my first thought with color, was getting that color. And then after I finished my drawing, I went through and I was like identifying all the big shapes throughout the painting. Um, and I mixed a color for each of those shapes that I saw. So that's what I did. So I had started with like this color that was this negative space color. And then I was looking over here and I was like, oh, I need to mix a color that's kind of like this. And then I mixed some colors for both the cloth and the vase, there's some yellows. So I think these yellows and yellow oranges were to cover all the different um, values of yellow that I was
Okay.
seeing. And then I had my yellow in the light, and and then this blue, these two different like light blues, these were for the cloth and the table. And this was probably also for the table. And then
Mm-hmm.
these two were probably my neutral gray. I always like to have a neutral gray on my palette. And so
Okay.
these are my neutral grays that I had mixed. And then I had a darker blue for probably more for accents and cast shadow. That's what this probably
Mm-hmm.
was. I bet this was cast shadow. Some combination
Okay.
of these two here. And then I had this pink because there's a lot of like pinks, especially as you move closer in in the cloth. There's a lot of like pinks and there's a reflection up here. So I had to
Okay.
have some pink mixed. So I mixed those
In
and then I put the colors up one shape at a time, kind of just like adjusted. Like, I would like take one color that I mixed for something and maybe combine it and adjust it, put it up on my canvas and until it looked right to me.
Okay. I'm always impressed how you're able to see color, like you said, pinks. When I look at, given that it's in the background, but when I look at the still life, I would never assume that there was like a hint of pink in there, but then you're able to pull it, put it in. To be very honest, I'd even like notice that in the finished painting, but that's how good you are in putting all of these colors together.
Yeah, let me go
It's
back to
beautiful.
the more finished piece.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this is getting closer to finish. But yeah, I mean it's like it's subtle, but some of these pinks are in here.
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I think also probably combine, those pinks definitely got mixed into the background color too. As I
Okay.
was, like you can actually see it here on my palette. Like it was probably mixing between these, maybe a little bit of this to get
Mm-hmm.
this color.
Okay. So you put a little bit of the pink in there as well?
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Something that we are so used to seeing, but we take it for granted. When yellow gets dark, it often goes green. Sometimes it can go more orange, but if it's like a real intense, pure yellow, it's going to go green as it gets darker. And that's just kind of like what happens with yellow. It's just perceived that way. So, in order to create yellow that goes darker, that's not leaning orange, you
Mm-hmm.
go green. And I think I played it up a little bit. So, if you compare, the way I was seeing
Mm-hmm.
it was I was seeing it as even greener than what's in reality. But that's not a bad thing because there's a lot of reddish
Yeah.
orange in this painting. So green's a nice complement to that. So it creates some color harmony as well.
Exact. That's funny because we mentioned that early in the beginning where I was saying, oh, it seems like all the colors are on one side, and then on your palette, I'm seeing the hints of blue and the green. I'm like, oh, that's why like it makes everything tie together so perfectly because there are nuances of the blues and the greens in there. That's so interesting.
Yeah, I mean, if every color in this painting were truly from the red, orange, yellow side of the color wheel, and there was nothing on the other side, this painting would feel unbalanced. It wouldn't feel like the color wouldn't feel harmonious. The color might even feel kind of flat. So you need to have like, even if you are painting a monochromatic or like a setup that's more like this, like an analogous setup, and you're painting with your full palette of color,
Yeah.
you find ways to sneak those other colors in, and that's what kind of bumps up gives it contrast, but it makes the color just so much more vibrant. So it
It's
always
beautiful.
amazes me when that happens.
It's beautiful. And now that you've done like this vintage vase piece, are you interested in doing like other pieces that you collect in vintage stores? Do you keep an eye out on for interesting objects?
Oh yeah, I mean I have tons of these that I haven't painted yet. Like I'm collecting. And I keep imagining. So I've done a few of these like studies where I have one or two that I paint together, but I kind of have this desire to do some more analogous paintings with like, I don't know, like tin vases and bottles and jars and things. Like I want to do like, and big ones, like big paintings. This is something that eventually I'm going to get to. But that idea that I have is inspired from this painting and a few of the paintings in this era of where I was doing these more analogous paintings and just setting up these really simple but beautiful um, objects and just playing around with color. And this painting was a lot about color. It was a study of color for me. It was not. I wasn't focused on composition. I wasn't. I mean, I wanted it to be a nice composition, but I was just like, I just want to paint this, and I'm going to play with the colors that I see, and like, how do I make them together on the canvas?
Hmm. Hmm. It's beautiful. I love it very much.
Thank you. I'll talk about just really quick. I didn't talk about my palette, so I did talk about
Oh,
like the colors I mix, but I didn't talk about the tube colors I use. So this is three
oh.
primary limited palette. It's this is titanium white over here. This is cadmium yellow, and
Hmm.
this is cadmium red, and this is ultramarine blue. These are probably M-gram colors because at the time I was using mostly strictly M-gram. So that's
Okay.
probably the brand of paint that's on my palette. But all of these colors, this is what I love about painting with a limited palette is that you can very easily mix color. Like you don't have to worry about all these variations. Like, how did I mix that green? Which yellow did I use? Which blue did I use? It's like, oh, this yellow and this blue with different varying amounts and maybe a little bit of red to like tone it down, maybe a little bit of white to like. So
Uh-huh.
with every single one of these piles, it's just kind of varying the amount of these four colors. So that was my palette. Um, I can run through my process
Hmm. Hmm.
again. It's, same process from last week, but I will talk about it again. So here's the underpainting before I fully put in the negative space, but just trying to focus on separating light from shadow. I've got these pictures of my value card here, which I can talk about. But I was trying to get some marketing images for my value card because I was like, I think I was about to release the value card for the first time, and so I was like, oh, maybe I can get some pretty pictures of the value card with color. So
Hmm.
that's
Those
what
are
these are
beautiful.
for. Yeah, this is just showing
You
like,
do is beautiful. I'm like, oh, that's beautiful. Like the colors, the palette.
yeah, I mean, I just love thinking about color and value and like
Mm.
how they relate. And if you look at this, you can see like if you look at this number seven strip right here, these three colors here, they're actually the same. I think they're the exact same color. So all nine of these colors right here are the exact same color. And or
Interesting.
that the exact same value. Sorry, they're the exact same value. So you have your these greens, these neutrals, and then these are red. And
Mm-hmm.
they're all a value seven, but I wanted to show that they're lighter than a value eight, they're darker than a value six. But when you put them on, they look like different colors next to the value. Like you see how this looks like a light green and this looks like a dark green, but they're the same.
It's yes, it's such a mind trick. It's very psychological.
Yeah. And it happens too, it happens here a little bit as well. I think that's the same color. This
Mm-hmm.
is a value 4 because you can
Mm-hmm.
see how it blends in there.
Yeah.
But it looks darker here. Gosh, is it? It's really tricking me. I'm like, is that the same? I think it is though. Um, but yeah, and then also as you move between the grayscale and the color, it's like you would never think that this is a value 7 because of how much it like pops off. But when you grayscale the
Mm.
whole thing, you're like, oh no, that is actually that's a dark value red.
Yeah.
Um, Even though it looks, reds want to, really saturated reds want to reveal themselves as light, as lit. So it seems like it's light, but it's not. So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, so that's just kind of a little tangent to what we were talking about. And I don't remember my process. Is that my process?
Mm-hmm. You said you
I
were
think
going to
that's
go
what it
through your
was.
process again.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So for this painting, I started with this, and then at the time, my process has changed a little bit since I painted this, but at the time I would stop after my underpainting and I would mix a bunch of color, like a whole bunch of, and I would mix the colors that I thought they were um, for each like big shape of color. I wouldn't mix every single color in the painting, but just like more like big averages. And
Mm-hmm.
nowadays I will mix a color and put it up on the canvas and adjust it.
Mm.
And then mix another color and put it up. And then I might go, ooh, the first color is wrong. And then I might go adjust the first color. So I kind of like
Okay.
build it. Uh, but at that point in time, I was just do like one big color mixing session and then I would start painting. That was probably like I mix the color, but then I brush mix to tweak the color. So I was probably tweaking the color as well. So you see how much like I'm pulling as I was going in and laying that yellow down. I was pulling
Mm.
yellow from the pile that I mixed here and pulling some yellow from here and maybe some yellow from here to try to get the color the more accurate color.
Yeah.
So we kind of like go through and get these big shapes in. And now you can see as I'm starting to put the negative space in, you're seeing me start to like carve my edges where here it was
Mm-hmm.
kind of going outside the lines and now I'm cutting in and trying to get more accuracy in the shapes. And as I'm going, I'm starting to fill in, you know, um, create form by breaking up those shapes a little bit as I go and bring more
Mm-hmm.
nuance to my color, which is also different from how I paint now. I think I would have held off on doing, now I would hold off on doing this and I would
Okay.
make sure that I really nailed the big shapes of color all over the canvas before I moved to start doing this kind of stuff. But at the
Mm-hmm.
time I would kind of like fluctuate between I would just start painting over here and I might leave one area unfinished. This one's interesting. Probably worked for a few hours and then that night still thinking about the painting, so I go into a picture of my painting and I start playing with like the markup tool. So that's what this is I'm thinking about the colors that I had, which these were the colors that I had down. And so I was going and thinking about like how do I want to tomorrow when I come back to this, how do I want to go and bring more, push more into more red into that orange and create more of these like feelings of pink and even purple. Like this is even moving a little bit purple, which is
Yeah.
creating some harmony with the yellow. And it was giving me some like time away from the painting, but I was still able to kind of like play around and think about what I wanted to do next with
Mm-hmm.
it. So these are my cute videos of Avery, which we can play in a minute. Um, Color mixing with Avery. And so this must have been the next day coming back in and continuing. I don't show my struggle. It probably looks like this was easy to get the shapes, but it wasn't. I think this was probably getting to this point and going, whew, okay, my proportions are right. Probably took
Mhm.
me some time to get there and some like very
Mhm.
slow, methodical, like one brush stroke at a time, stand
Yeah.
back, like, what did that do? And then I was finally able to say, okay, now I can go and fill in my negative space and start working more on the detail in the cloth. I ended up wiping out a lot of that gray in the cloth because,
Uh-huh.
and this is the reason why I wouldn't do it this way again. It's because that white, having all that white paint in there is going to muddy up my color. So if that is underneath the orange, the darker orange paint that I have to put on top, it's just going to turn that orange paint like a muddy orange, like what lighter, muddier orange. So I scraped it
Mhm.
down and then I went back in with some thin orange paint in the areas where I saw those the darker pattern. And then I went back over top of that with the lighter paint to start
Mhm. Okay.
breaking the orange up and creating more definition where the lighter parts were showing through. All right. So this is the final paint.
I can see the hints of pink snow in the bottom. Now after hearing everything, like, oh, okay, now I see the hints of pink,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
subtle blues, the green, well, definitely the green in the vase. And I can see how things are all like pulling together, bringing everything together.
Yeah. And I even did this, like, this was actually a really helpful brush stroke here compositionally because it's just this tall thing centered on a canvas. It's kind of divided slightly below center, and then you have this edge of the
Mm-hmm.
tabletop, and then you've got all this negative space, and it's equal on both sides and almost equal on the
Mm-hmm.
top. It's a little bit taller here. And without this, there's like this boring sameness that would have happened between this side and this side. But then it just needed something to kind of like hold you in the painting and feel like one of the sides visually has more weight than the other.
Yeah.
And so I think I mean, I don't think I was thinking about that whenever I did it, but it was more like I was trying to figure out, well, what's going to make this feel right. And I put that down and I was like, oh, that's it. And now looking back, I'm like, oh, this is why this is working is because of this, the equal sides and it needing something to kind of like move you. Maybe it also helps with like you move up and over and around and down or something. It kind of helps with the
Mm-hmm.
movement through the painting. Yeah. So anything else that we didn't cover that would be helpful to talk about?
I don't think so. I think we covered through like the choice of the object, the creative process, the layering, the colors, the color placements, your palette. Is there anything else that you would want to share?
Um, I'm trying to think if there's anything I would want to change about it. There isn't a lot I would want to change about it. Particularly in the vase and the cloth. I probably would paint it differently now, but not because I didn't paint it well then. It's more just like
Mhm.
I've evolved a little bit, but I like the way I painted it. The only thing that bugs me, I probably shouldn't say this because if anyone ever buys this painting, they might be like, I don't want them to think about what bugs me about it, but just these little bits of brushwork here
Okay.
bother me a little bit. I'm like, I wish I would have just smoothed these out and made them like a little bit like I can tell that I was using a small brush here.
It's so interesting to always know what goes on in like the artist's mind because you know the process. You look at it with completely different eyes. I think it's perfect. Like even compositionally wise, how vertical, but then like, you know, the behind and the cloth and the details and even this like little triangular hint of yellow on the table, and then the nuances of green. The more I look at it, I see details of how you're very meticulous in putting color on like the canvas.
Well, thank you.
Yes.
All part of a learning journey, for sure. This painting was a lot more about learning than anything else. Yellow is a tough color to paint with. I really find it to be tough, and I struggled. When I first started painting, I wouldn't paint with cadmium, um, just because of, it's toxic, and it was kind of freaked me out, and I wasn't sure what to do. But I've since done more research and started painting with cadmium paints. But cadmium yellow or any variation of cadmium yellow is a lot easier to work with than I started working with Hansa yellow. I was mostly using like Hansa yellow by itself, and Hansa yellow it's a transparent paint, and um, I didn't really understand the difference between transparent and opaque. So cadmium yellow is opaque. There's the thumbs up. Um, but opaque paint, you can't see through. Like when you put it on, it goes on kind of thick and you can't see through it. And so with yellow, you want that color to like fully have full coverage.
Mm.
If you're painting something like this, where, I have an underpainting, if I would have used Hansa yellow, I would not have been able to create this kind of like opaque coverage of this yellow. And I didn't understand why I struggled with yellow so much. And then I started working with the cadmium, and I was like, oh, okay. So now I'm starting to understand why it's important to kind of like really know your paints, and why different opacities and transparencies, they do different things. Yeah. So do you want to watch a cute video of Avery mixing paint?
Yes.
Okay. Cute video of Avery and I mixing colors together.
What color is that?
And it's dark blue.
Dark blue?
Actually, purple.
Yeah, that's what it makes. Okay, what do you think happens if I add yellow to it?
It makes dark yellow.
Yeah, sure does. Oh, look at that.
It's making rainbow color.
What color is this?
Yellow.
Yep. There you go.
I see dark yellow.
Dark yellow. Kind of green.
Let's play I Spy with mixed colors.
What do you think's gonna happen? Ooh, look at that.
What color is this color? This color that has two more colors in it.
It has two more colors in it. This color, this has red, white, a little bit of yellow, and maybe a teeny touch of blue to neutralize it down.
1 plus 3 equals 4.
It sure does. Is that how color mixing is? It's like math.
Yeah.
Okay. You gonna do one more?
Uh-huh.
What color should we do?
Let's do white. Right here.
What are we gonna do with white? What are we
We're
gonna
just gonna
mix?
mix it into the pink.
Oh, well, no, because we need that color. We need that color, just like that.
Maybe we could put the white here.
What do you want to do? What color do you want to mix with white?
Maybe some red.
Well, we just made pink, but we can do it again if you want. You want to do another pink?
Actually, I want to mix green, actually.
We're going to make green?
Yes.
Okay, we'll make... What green do we do? We'll do a really light green. We have a bunch of greens. We already have a bunch of greens. Do we really need green?
Yes.
What about orange?
Okay, orange better.
I'm going to do orange because I don't have an orange. So, what do you think I need to put with that yellow to make orange?
Don't know.
Teeny bit of red?
Okay.
How about that?
Yeah.
Let's see.
I think you did it
Ooh.
really fast.
Huh?
If you did it really fast to make orange, that is orange there.
It's orange. We
You
got
have
some
orange
orange.
right
We need
there.
to neutralize that orange a little bit.
You have orange right there.
Yeah, that's a dark orange though.
But
Now we have a light orange
why do you want a light orange?
because we have some stuff in the still life that is light orange. How do we neutralize the orange?
Don't know.
You don't know? We add a little bit of the complement.
It's a compliment.
What's a complement? Complement is the color that's opposite your color on the color wheel. So, complement of orange is blue.
Blue, but that
So I'm gonna put a little bit of blue in it.
was not my favorite color. That's Daddy's color.
Oh, blue is?